Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome. Welcome to the live stream. We got 5 people here. Hello to the 5 people who are here. Thank you for joining me today. If you are here because you are looking for a job, you are temporarily unemployed, I got great news for you. You probably feel like you're right around here. You're actually right around here. You're actually awesome, even though it may not feel like it right now. I've been looking forward to this live stream for a while because today we're going to be talking about that wonderful job interview question that brightens everybody's day when they get asked it. What is your weakness? We are going to get into that, and we got a lot to get through, a lot to unpack. So thank you so much for being here. I also want to say thank you to my new members. I have a couple of new members this week, so that's awesome. I'm glad to have you aboard. And for those of you who don't know, if you join my channel, you click on the little join button, you become a member of my channel, and you get extra videos from me every week where I go into a little bit more advanced stuff. And there you go. We have, who do we got here? We got a couple of people. Matthias, if I'm saying that right. Hey, nice Sunday. Yeah, happy Sunday to you too. It's great to see you here. And My Dream is here. I know My Dream. I've seen you before, and you've been pretty active in the chat, so that's awesome. If you are here, get in the chat, say you're here, say where you're watching from or listening from. I always find that interesting. That's great. I got my Sunday hair. You know, when you wake up and it's Sunday morning and you don't feel like doing any kind of grooming whatsoever, but you kind of have the whole good enough kind of thing. And guys, you know what I'm talking about when you're shaving or you're doing your hair. It's kind of good enough, right? That's what I got on right now. If they had a celebrity CEO best hair make off, I wonder who would win. I'm sure it wouldn't be me. Do you think Elon Musk would win that one? I don't know. The jury's out on that one. Uzair, if I'm saying that right. Uzair says, just wanted to let you know that your videos helped me immensely to prepare for my job interviews, and I got the job. Congratulations, Uzair. That's awesome. That's great. You see? You are hireable. You are highly valuable. You make a great employee that adds a lot of value, even though it doesn't feel like that a lot of times when we go through this process. So that's great to hear. Rosalind says, watching from NYC. Right on. NYC, New York. New York, New York. I still haven't gotten used to the replacement building for the 2 towers. I'm just permanently stuck in the past. I always expect to see the 2 towers, on Manhattan. And whenever they show it like in a movie or whatever, I just have to think like, it doesn't look right somehow. But thank you for joining me. And I always say it Theophilus. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but that's how I say it. Theophilus. Good morning. Watching from, Saint Eustatius. Eustatius, if I got that right. That's awesome. Thank you. I'm glad you're all here. We're going to talk about everybody's favorite question. What is your weakness? And we got a lot to unpack, like I just said. So probably the easiest way to do this is talk about the obvious things that we do when we're asked this question. And there's going to be a recurring theme here. And the recurring theme, a lot of times in job interviews, okay, is that you have to imagine you're talking to a 5-year-old, because what we say to a question is going to depend on the context, and it's going to depend mainly on who we're talking to, okay? It's funny because this whole sort of thing of telling people how to answer job interview questions, it's very hard to give like a one-size-fits-all answer because, if you're sitting down with your father or your mother or something, and they ask you, what is your weakness? You're going to give one answer. But if you're sitting down with, I don't know, a friend you knew from high school, you're going to give another answer. And if you're sitting down with somebody you meet at the bank, you're going to give a different answer. It entirely depends on the context and who you're talking to. So if someone like me or someone else gives you a recommendation for how you should answer, it's going to largely depend on what our assumptions are of who you're talking to and how much they understand, what's their reason for asking the question, how much they know about you already, what the purpose of the interview is, like what job are you going for, this kind of thing. So as a general rule, if you're going to a general job interview, in my opinion, you've got to sort of think about, like, you're being asked this question by, I hate to say it, like a 5-year-old, somebody who, doesn't really understand kind of the implications of what they're asking. And it's highly loaded, and they're working off of assumptions and stereotypes because they don't know you. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Theophilus says, I have learned a great lot looking at your job interview videos. I have a major interview coming up next week, so I'm getting prepared. Good. Preparation is the key. The more you prepare, the higher your chances. Okay? The number one factor is random probability. I hate to say it, but it's true. Luck is a huge factor. But beyond that, when it comes to things you can control, preparation is number one. Experience also helps too. The more interviews you go to, number one, the more experience you have, so you're not as flustered going to interviews because you've been asked every question in the book. You've encountered every type of interviewer in the book, so you're not surprised by things anymore. And on top of that, you have this wealth of experience of having answered different ways in the past. You know how it turned out. So that also is very useful. Naz from Nigeria. Right on. Nigeria. That's awesome. Thank you for being here. Thank you to everybody. Okay, so the obvious answer. Okay, number one, we got to get some things out of the way first. The obvious answer is that when somebody asks you, so what is your weakness? A lot of people, they do the standard thing where they try and say a strength and they pretend it's a weakness, right? That's sort of like answer 101, right? What is your weakness? Well, I care too much and I work too hard, and it's hard for me to really dial back my love for my employer, That's kind of a standard amateur thing that a lot of people do. A lot of people that are doing job interviews for the first time, they might do this, okay? That's actually a pretty bad way to answer. Don't try that because, number one, you can pretty much guarantee that the interviewer has encountered that before. Number two, even if they essentially have the mind of a 5-year-old, they're still not fooled by that, okay? They still believe that you're not really being honest when you answer the question. And so it's just not a good answer. Don't try and dress up a strength as a weakness. When they ask you what your weakness is, you give a strength. No, bad answer. Okay, so let's get that out of the way first. Hopefully everybody probably already knows that first, okay? And that's a common thing that some people will say, right? So the other one that's sort of equally kind of basic is to say, I don't have any weaknesses, right? That's pretty popular. Tell me about your weaknesses, or what's your greatest weakness? And you say, well, I wish that I had any, but I just don't. I'm perfect, it's really a challenge, being asked questions like this when I'm just so perfect. It's very embarrassing, and I'm always embarrassed, and we just have to get through this together. Yeah, don't say that. Okay, don't say I have no weaknesses, because once again, even if the interviewer has the mind of a 5-year-old, they won't be fooled by that. They won't believe you, okay? Even if hypothetically you felt you were being honest, you're like, I don't really feel that I have any crushing, debilitating weaknesses that I have to constantly try and compensate for. Even if you believe that and you say that, they're not going to believe you. They're going to regard that as a hostile answer. You're being disingenuous, you're lying, and that's going to be a major red flag. Okay, so that's how this question is kind of a little bit of a trap. You have to say something that they would believe is a genuine answer to this. Okay, so that's the other thing we have to get out of the way first. Don't say, I don't have any weaknesses, and don't say a strength and pretend that that's your weakness, okay? My weakness is I'm just too good, and, it really is not fair to other people when they have to work with me, because I just outshine them. And, if they kind of stand next to me, they look so inferior. I feel sorry for them. Don't say anything like that. Even in jest, The third one is to try and make a joke, right? The third thing we have to get out of the way right off the bat is to make a joke. What's your greatest weakness? Chocolate, right? Kryptonite, that kind of thing. Not like, look, even if you think you're being clever, okay, I can guarantee you that they've heard that before, right? And they're probably going to be upset at the obvious deflection of the question in a very sort of amateur kind of way. Even if you said that, I don't know, maybe you could say that like, just as a joke and then immediately go to a serious answer. Maybe that would be okay, but just don't do that, okay? I guarantee you they've heard it all before. If these are professional recruiters that you're dealing with where their job is to deal with candidates all day long, 9 to 5, every day, week after week, month after month, year after year, I guarantee you they've heard everything, okay? So don't do that either. Okay, so we've got those three things out of the way first. That's the obvious stuff. I'm sure a lot of you guys kind of know that already, right? Now that we've done that, this is where it gets more interesting. Is it Akash? Akash, is that how you say your name? It's a smiley face doing this. Right? Yes. Good afternoon from Algeria. Algeria is still legally France, right? As I understand it. Capital Algiers. Last time I checked, it was like legally the same country. If you are in Algeria, you're in France and vice versa. I could be wrong about that. That's what I remembered from a million years ago when I learned this stuff. Naz Faces is saying, so what would be the perfect example of a weakness? We're going to get into that. Now that you brought it up, chocolate is a real weakness of mine, actually. Yes, and it's all vitamins, too. It's healthy. I'm living proof of that. So be like me and, get on the caffeine chocolate diet. It'll work wonders for you. Now, let's move on, okay? We've got the obvious answers out of the way. What probably most intelligent people would do if they were asked, what is your weakness? Especially a lot of technical people, technically minded people, maybe they're not as cynical as the rest of us. They don't see the job interview for the totally artificial encounter that it is. Okay, and they give an honest answer. So somebody says to you, what is your weakness? And you, having been a fine, upstanding professional person, you have worked out what your actual weaknesses are. And so when somebody asks you this question, the obvious thing to do is to start giving an honest answer. And you say, look, I'm really great at this, and I'm great at that, but I'm not so great at this. This is something that has been a bit of a flaw of mine. It's held me back in the past. And you might even say, I'm currently working on it to improve it. Okay? Now, you and I both know that that's a great place to be. Okay? If you have the self-awareness and the experience and the maturity to be able to say to yourself, look, I recognize that I'm not as strong as I should be or I could be in this area. Okay, and you get bonus points if, having realized that, you are actually taking steps to try and improve yourself and overcome this weakness. Okay, we all know that this is awesome. You are awesome. This is what life is about. And if you keep taking that attitude and keep working on it, after a few years, you're going to be pretty damn good. And you're probably going to have overcome, or at least become functioning despite some weakness. And let's face it, we all have weaknesses. You can't be strong in every area. That just doesn't exist. That's not some dogma. That's just like, experience. Point out to me someone who's strong in every single area, and I'll tell you that doesn't exist. I've never seen that. I've never heard people point out examples. I've never seen documentary evidence of anyone being perfect in every area. You can't be strong everywhere. So everybody knows this, okay? And everyone's going to have weaknesses. So if you've figured out what yours is and you're taking steps to improve it, that's perfect. Now, in a perfect world, any interviewer worth their salt who actually knows what they're doing would recognize this for the great thing that it is. Okay? And if you're dealing with being asked this question in a good situation by an intelligent, experienced person, whether they're a recruiter or a hiring manager or a business owner or whatever they are, okay, and you give an honest answer and you can say, this is my weakness and this is what I'm doing to overcome it, that would be an A+ answer, okay? Unfortunately, here's the thing though, unfortunately, we live in the real world where most people that ask you, what is your weakness, have the mind of a 5-year-old, basically. They are unaware of both people and career paths and what are required to be good at your job. Okay, this is the unfortunate reality. Now, it's not universally true. Sometimes you will get an amazing person asking you this question that's being very genuine and they honestly want to know. And they would regard that answer as good. If you said, this is my weakness, this is what I'm doing to overcome it, they would recognize it for what it is. However, because we don't live in that world, and most instances of being asked this question are usually from, dare I say, a recruiter or somebody who just doesn't understand people, and it's not an honest exchange. It's a very artificial exchange. Where you are judged on appearances, you are judged on stereotypes, things like this. It's not an accurate assessment of you. And a lot of times, the person assessing you, and I'll just say it, a lot of times they don't even care about an accurate assessment of you. They're doing what's easiest for them, okay? It's that self-interest, okay? And as a result, they don't use this question the way it perhaps should be used. Instead, the way it turns out is that they ask you for a weakness. They say, what's wrong with you? Okay, what's a bad thing about you? That's what they're asking. And you, being the fine, upstanding person you are and a trusting individual, you are honest with them. You say, look, I'm not very good at this. I need to improve it. And as a reward for your honesty, and for being a well-adjusted person who has the self-awareness to know this about themselves, you then get eliminated because you have given them a reason not to hire you. That's how this goes a lot of the time. It should not go like that, but it does. Okay? That's the reality that a lot of us are confronted with. Okay? So this is something that we have to address. Okay? And I'm going to spend some time addressing that. But first, I want to go back to you guys because we got some interesting things. Hello, ISTJ from INFP. Yes, I am probably the closest thing to a pure ISTJ that you can get. Certainly the I part and the J part. But you know what? That's another example of something that could be considered a weakness that I've had to overcome. And you get all kinds of theories about this. For example, I've heard people say that, you shouldn't give traits about yourself. Let's be honest. Some traits are weakness for certain jobs. Like if you're putting your name in the hat to get a sales position, especially an outside sales position where you have to go talk to potential customers and prospects and persuade them to buy your company's product. Being an introvert, a lot of times, can be a serious weakness because you will hate going up to people and interacting with them naturally. Sure, you can do it, and you can do it as well as any extrovert if you learn how it's done, but you will not enjoy it. It's not what you do for fun. Okay, so without analyzing it to the nth degree, I would say that being an introvert in that context is a definite weakness. If you want to be a researcher, you want to work in R&D, okay, you're going to be alone in a lab all day long, and you have a very extroverted type personality, you're probably not going to enjoy that. That's going to be a weakness in the context of being a researcher, because you need to be okay with being alone by yourself, working solo for many hours a day, a lot of times, for a lot of jobs. And if you're not okay with that, if you go nuts because you're getting lonely and you can't stand being alone, you get emotional issues and things, that's going to be a problem. So in that context, being an extrovert, I would say is a weakness. Put it this way. It is perceived as a weakness, okay? And that's maybe the only thing that matters in this context. What do we have here? Elsa RM. The weakness is the difficulty to say when you need sleep. Yeah, that can be a weakness. Dipro says, I become frustrated when working in an underperforming team. You are not the only one. That was an answer you gave me, and it's always worked well for me. Good. And hopefully it's honest, too. Like, I'm not a fan of people that tell you, give this answer. And it could be for you. It could be a total lie, right? I'm not a fan of that. You know, what would be ideal is if you could pass the interview without totally misrepresenting yourself, right? You know, you want to convey an idealized version of yourself, but you don't want to sell yourself on someone that you're not, ideally, right? If you can at all help it. That's kind of my attitude. Akash says, when answering weakness questions, do we have to say about soft skills as a weakness or technical skills as a weakness? Please clarify. I'm going to get into that. I have to set it up first. Hello everyone from Indonesia, depending on where you are in the world, how they say it. Yes, Algeria used to be a French colony and it got its independence in 1962. The whole system is still French, though. You have a very rich general culture. Thank you. Yeah, I know they've had some issues there. I mean, where in the world hasn't had issues since 1962 almost? I never picked up one of your lives before, my live streams. I really enjoy your present, a balanced, well thought out argument like I'm doing now. And your English is so clear for non-native speakers. Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I would speak faster if I could think faster. So hopefully, I'm glad it works out well for you that I speak slower. I always recommend, this is Matthias. I always recommend your channel to my students. I coach English for software developers. Awesome. Thank you very much. That's very flattering. I think that the answer should be tailored to what we know about the company and positive and position rule while being truthful. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Okay. So let's continue this further. Okay, we've established that, you know, you shouldn't give these off-the-cuff answers. Don't say a strength. Don't say you have no weaknesses. You know, don't say a joke like, you know, my weakness is chocolate. What you want to do, what would be ideal is if you could give an honest answer, okay? Because if you are talking to someone who's quite prescient and someone who's quite intelligent and experienced in the world of business, and they genuinely want to get to know you, okay? If you're getting a job on the hidden job market, you're talking to maybe a hiring manager, the hiring manager happens to be intelligent and forthright, and they actually do want to get to know you. Okay, this is not some totally artificial political posture like a job interview usually is with a recruiter. But if that's the case, okay, then it might actually be good to be honest with them and do this. However, that's a minority of times, okay? Like we said, if you give a genuine answer, this is my honest weakness and this is what I'm doing. A lot of recruiters I've noticed say that's what they want you to do. They want you to give an honest weakness, and they consider a good answer to be an honest weakness coupled with a legitimate thing you're doing to overcome it. Now, I always have to put this disclaimer on. I'm not beating up on all recruiters. There are a handful of really, really good ones out there, okay? I've worked with some of them. I've seen this. They know their stuff, okay? But unfortunately, there are a lot more of them out there that I can't say that about. They're not very intelligent. They really don't have much experience under their belt. So how would they know, you know, a good trait to have for a particular job? They wouldn't. They don't. They've never been in that job. They never worked in that department, you know, and they judge purely by stereotypes and assumptions. And as we know, stereotypes and assumptions are most often wrong. Now, so I say don't give the honest answer. If you're dealing with a recruiter, if you're dealing with an entry-level job, or you're dealing with a very large organization, I would say, don't give the honest answer because it will not serve you well. And there's people out there that want to be honest, you know? And I feel for you because I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, some of us that are a little more experienced with the recruitment and selection process, we know that this doesn't help you. It should, but it doesn't. Okay? So if you're dealing with a recruiter, you're in an entry-level job, or you're dealing with a large organization, in my opinion, my recommendation would be not to give an honest weakness, okay? A real weakness. Because they won't see it as a good thing. They will simply use it as an excuse to eliminate you. Okay? And one of the worst things you can do is give a weakness that's actually one of the things that they're looking for. Okay? So this question is a flip of what are your strengths? The answer to what are your strengths is you're going to say that you have things that they happen to be looking for, right? And you can start with the things that they've listed in the job posting. We're looking for this. So those would be good things to say. Conversely, the worst thing you could say to what is my weakness is, oh, I don't have one of those things that I already know you're looking for. So if they're looking for, someone with sales experience and they say, what's your weakness? You say, well, my weakness is I don't have any sales experience. That's pretty much the kiss of death right there. Okay. Okay. Now, probably one of the number one questions I get from people about this question, what are your weakness? What is your weakness? Is they give me a question that they've been asked and they say, how do you answer this? And I say, well, that's just the weakness question. It's dressed up in a different way, but it's the same question. They are going to ask you this question in every job interview you get. It's just that they may phrase it differently. Now, if you bear with me, I want to show you an example of that. I found an article on the internet that lists some great alternate forms of this question. And this is the article. It's you can check it out yourself. It's from a website called Melissa Lorena. So check it out. Now, here is, I know you can only see a little bit of it here, but here are some examples. So instead of saying, what is your weakness or what is your weaknesses, they may phrase it like this. How self-aware would you say you are? Tell me about your blind spots. You see, that doesn't sound like what is your weakness. It doesn't have any words in common hardly. And the word weakness isn't there. But they're asking you about something you do bad, okay? That's the common theme here. What do you do bad? Right? That's like saying, what's your weakness? Okay. What do you want to learn in this role? You see how subtle that is? Right? They're not asking you about something you're bad at. It's something that's implied you could be better at if you're going to be learning more about it. You see? Clever, right? And these people think they're so clever for doing this, okay? That's what gets me. We offer training in a myriad of topics. Would you be interested in refining any particular topic, right? There we go. Nice and subtle, right? They don't ask, what is your weakness? They ask it in this indirect, roundabout way where you're going to be answering with something that you're not good at. That's the implication. Now, I could go on. There's like a whole bunch here. This particular website, it lists 20, okay? Here we go. Here's a random one. Tell me about your mentors. What qualities do you admire in them, right? They're mentoring you because you're not strong in that area. You could be better. You see, so these are the kind of psychological tricks that they're going to be employing. Okay. You know what? Let's do a couple more just for the sheer hell of it here. Number 12, what would your current manager say are your biggest areas of improvement? Okay, well, that's not as subtle, but you get the point, right? They're asking you the weakness question. Number 14, what about this position appeals to you most? Okay. That's so subtle that I don't even agree with it, but let's see here. Number 15, tell me how you would handle the following situations. And then they insert things. Okay, so, okay, fine. Some are better than others, but hopefully you can appreciate the issue where this question can be very heavily disguised. And I get a lot of questions from people saying, how do you answer this question? I can get my quotes going up, right? I'm not a crook. and the question they give me is the weakness question. It's just in a different form. So I pretty much guarantee you will encounter this question. The only sort of unknown is how they're going to phrase it. Okay. But if you're expecting it, forewarned is forearmed, right? So that's the deal here. Okay. Where are we here? True. Yes. From Dana. Matthias, I think that the answer should be tailored to what we did that one. Frank from Mexico City, capital of Mexico. Weaknesses should be answered as a hidden virtue. Yes and no. It can be, but we're going to get into that. This is the absolute truth. Prasad says, hello, sir. You have a nice content. I do watch them before going to interviews. Thank you. Well, great. I hope it's helping. I hope you're getting value. Elsa RM, my friend Elsa RM says, is it okay to be an introvert and an extrovert? I like working alone, and I also like sharing knowledge with others. Definitely. For anyone who doesn't know, some people are just not into the Myers-Briggs type indicator. That's fine. They've done some weird things in the last 20 years with it, where they extend it to supposedly reveal all kinds of things about you. It doesn't. It's just a very general tool. It's useful for what it is, but it doesn't predict the future. Okay. And if you get into that tool, it classifies you as either an introvert or an extrovert. An introvert is somebody who can do social interaction, but it's an energy draining experience for them. An extrovert is someone who can do social interaction, but it's an energy charging experience for them. They do it for fun. That's what they do to relax. Okay. It has nothing to do with how good you are at social interaction. Okay. I hate using myself as an example because I'm not the most shining example ever, but I'm almost a pure introvert. And I've got a YouTube channel where I'm talking to people, right? Is that a contradiction? Of course it is. I've given keynote speeches. I've done a lot of public speaking. I've been a supervisor of many, many employees. That's not what you would think of as an introvert. I can do it, but do I do that when I come home? No. I watch TV. I read a book. I'm by myself to recharge, right? Okay, it talks about what your preferences are rather than your abilities. Okay, so yes, you could totally be an introvert, but still enjoy talking to people about specific topics. You can still enjoy interacting with some people on a smaller scale in a certain context. And I'll tell you something else. If you look at all the innovators throughout history, the people that have invented things, the people that have blazed the trail and pioneered things, most of them are introverts. In this society where we value social interaction and conflict management, introverts for some reason tend to get beat up. The reality is that around 50% of all people are introverts, and we're the ones that are inventing things, that are driving the world forward. Our weakness is that we might not be able to interact with people very well. We can't handle conflict. We can't resolve conflict. We're not as aware of the diplomacy and politeness that maybe we should be. That's an acquired skill, by the way. I've had to learn some of that. But yeah, being an introvert is not a weakness. In many ways, it's the strength. If you are a detail-oriented person, okay, that's a huge strength. Let me tell you, I've worked with a ton of extroverts, and I've seen the value of extroverts. If you have, a sales department, I've really seen the value of extroverts. But one thing I can say about these people, and I'm not beating up on anybody. I'm just saying that something I've noticed that goes hand in hand with that extreme extroversion is a lack of attention to detail. Okay? Or the ability to follow rules consistently. So an extrovert generally would not make a great safety person, or perhaps a lawyer. But once again, that's just a tendency. There's many, many exceptions. Okay. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little rambling trip to nowhere as a detour. Let's get back on this here. Um, oh, somebody retracted their message. I love that. It always makes me wonder. I'm curious now. What did you say that was so inflammatory? So yes, that's the introvert extrovert thing. Shakib, if I'm saying that right, Shakib? Recruiter, how do you enforce change management? Oh, I love questions like that. I always wonder if they really even know what change management is when they ask questions like that. Me, what the heck are you talking about? Indirectly. Recruiter, you created capacity. How do you allocate it when you have resistance to change? Wow, that is some high-level management baloney. I would use another word instead of baloney, but yeah. How do you answer a question who asks you something that sounds complicated, but they themselves have no clue what they're asking about? They have no clue how that stuff works. How do you impress them with your answer? That's a good question. How do you enforce change management? What a silly thing to ask. I mean, change management is people being receptive to things changing. They don't fear it. They don't oppose it automatically, right? How do you enforce it? You implement change management, the principles, communication, right? You put people through change. You explain the reasoning behind the change, blah, blah, blah. How do you enforce it? I've wanted to do a live stream called something like Let's Talk Business, where we just get into business topics. I'd love to talk about that. Unfortunately, everybody only wants to really talk about how to get a job, so that's why we're doing these. But if anybody wants to join me for that kind of discussion, let me know, because any excuse to have one of those, I will jump at. Akash says, sir, what if the interviewer gets dominant on me based on my answer? Like, you mean they object to your answer and they start putting you down or saying offensive things like that's a stupid answer? Is that what you're talking about? Depending on what they say, you would say different things, There's a couple of quick things you can do. You could say, well, I'm very sorry, my answer seems to have triggered you. That wasn't my intention. A way to turn it around is to say, what kind of answer were you hoping for? Were you fishing for something in particular? That kind of thing. If it gets into the territory of an insult, but you still want to keep things civil and cordial, you could say, like, I'm sorry, that did I maybe misunderstand that? That sounded like a put down, and then have them explain, was that a put down? Usually when people have to sort of explicitly say that, they shy away from it. It depends what they say, right? You could say, I'm very sorry to have offended you. It wasn't my intention. Anyway. Tekla, if I'm saying that right. Tekla, my weakness is getting agitated when work is not done accordingly. I don't know if that will work in my favor. Tekla from Namibia. If that was a genuine answer, I would almost hire you on the spot. That's in my opinion, that's a great trait to have, because those types of people are few and far between. And what happens to most people is that they might, even if they start out thinking like that, they take their work very seriously. They're invested in making sure that it's done properly. Okay, which is a great trait. Even if you start out like that, a lot of people, because of the culture in their workplace, they end up disengaging. They're saying, you know what? Nobody else gives a crap about, their job. So why am I losing sleep over this? If nobody else cares and the boss doesn't even care, why do I care? So they just sort of go, okay, fine, whatever. I'm just going to do the easiest thing that I can get away with just so that I don't get upset. And as a result, their quality of their work goes down. And brilliance doesn't happen. Great things don't happen. So a lot of times people don't start with that attitude, but the ones that do, unfortunately, depending on the organizational culture, it beats that out of them. And that's bad. So the fact that you're starting with that is a great start, okay? Now, the problem is that if you said that to a recruiter, that falls under the category of what we talked about at the very beginning of this live stream, which is don't give a strength as a weakness, because that's how they'll hear it. You could be completely genuine. You could be being completely honest here, in which case it's amazing. Then you're amazing. But if you say that to a recruiter, most likely they won't believe you. They'll say, it's like saying, my weakness is I just work too hard and I care too much. That's how they'll hear it. Okay? Now, in all fairness to them, I mean, if you just met somebody, you don't know if they're being honest or not. And the odds is that they're not. However, this is where it exposes how job interviews are so completely ridiculous. It's because you need to get to know the person to know if they're being honest or not. Based on what you know about them, when they say that, are they being honest? If you know that person, you will be able to detect if that's genuine or not, right? But job interviews are a way for them to try and get to know you without putting in the time to get to know you. It's silly. So they won't be able to determine whether that's true or not, so they will take it as too good to be true. It's probably a lie. So for that reason, even though that's awesome, I would not recommend saying it, because a lot of times, depending on who you're talking to, they will regard it as a bad thing. They'll assume it's a lie. I mean, I would love to have lots of employees that do that. They get agitated when the work's not done properly. They're not going to rest, and they're not going to let it lie unless it's been fixed and it's done to a high standard. That's what every boss wants. And I'm afraid that if you have a series of lower level jobs in bad organizations, I fear that they may beat that out of you. And for your own mental health, you'll have to stop doing that. And that's a terrible tragedy. So what should you do? In my opinion, if it's possible, try and get a job on the hidden job market where you're talking to the hiring managers. It's much more of a honest exchange. It's not this sort of highly artificial encounter where everybody's got their guards up. You're putting on your armor when you go to a job interview. You're not going to be honest. You're going to use canned answers to standard questions, right, as a defense mechanism. And they've got their armor on too. They're not going to believe you when you are honest, right? Totally artificial situation. This is what we're navigating. Okay. Francisco, I've been asked many times about my leadership style, and I always answer, it's situational depending on the context. Is that right? Yes. Yeah, that's not the topic for today, but you're absolutely correct. There isn't one style of leadership or of leading a team, okay? Depending on the situation, you will have to wear many hats. Sometimes you're authoritative. Sometimes you're delegative. Sometimes you're, there's all kinds of, I forget the latest jargon and, how they describe these things. But, you're consultative, right? You deal with people one-on-one, okay? Or it could be democratic, where, if the majority think this is the right thing to do, fair enough, I'll sign off on it. That's what we should do, right? But obviously, you're going to change your approach depending on the situation, right? I mean, you can't just sort of do a paint by numbers and say, I always make an executive decision, or I always put it to a vote, right? I mean, that's ridiculous. You have to adjust your decision-making mechanism depending on your team, depending on the problem, depending on the context, depending on the situation. Anyway. Okay, so Elsa RM has that's a super sticker because it's got the little icon dancing around. Thank you so much, Elsa RM. If you had a question, I would prioritize it. If you want like a more intense sort of answer, if I'm sort of glossing over things to a question, just give a super chat and I will prioritize that. Okay, so let's continue. We've talked about obvious answers not to say. We've talked about the many forms that what is your weakness can come in, right? We've looked at that website. There's some examples there. Okay. Let's talk about the recruiter's perspective, because this is very important. In order to know what answer to give, you have to know how these people think, right? Like what they're looking for, why they're asking, and what's their knowledge and their expectations on this topic. Without knowing that, it's hard to understand what would be a good answer, okay? Now, the recruiter's perspective on this question is, and I'm going to adjust the brightness of my screen a little bit because I'm very, very white right now. The background's white, my shirt is white, everything's white. I need an earring and I need to shave my head, and I could pass off for Mr. Clean if I lost about 150 pounds. Let's see. Okay, that should be a bit better. Okay, so the way this works is, in a job interview, you can assume that almost every candidate will exaggerate and will lie in a lot of cases, okay, about what they have and what, the answers to their questions. Okay, so the recruiter's perspective is they're going into this encounter a lot of times with that firmly in their mind. They're not really taking anything you say at face value. Okay, that's kind of a very standard attitude that recruiters have. They don't want you to tell you things. They want you to demonstrate things. And the evidence to back this up is the fact that they're so reliant these days on behavioral questions. If they say, like, are you a very confident person? Everybody's going to say, oh, yes, yeah, I'm very confident, whether you are or not, right? So that's not good enough. They're not going to ask the question in that form. They're going to say, tell me about a time when you showed confidence, right? And if you go, geez, I can't think of anything on the spur of the moment, then that suggests that you're not a very confident person, right? You see, and then they congratulate themselves on being so brilliant at how they got you to surface that, right? If, on the other hand, they say, tell me about a time when you were confident, you say, well, only yesterday there was a situation, and in order to fix it, I had to do this, and I did it. This is what I did. I got up and I made a speech and I, blah, blah, and this was the result. And that showed if I didn't have confidence, I wouldn't be able to do that. But I have confidence in my abilities to be able to, A, do public speaking, 2, get everyone's attention, 3, persuade people, and 4, to be able to ease everyone's concerns, right? And I'm confident in my own abilities to do that. I knew I could do it because of many years of practice, right? If you say something like that, they'll be like, okay, I can tell you're a confident person. Right? And then they congratulate themselves on being so prescient, and they think they're operating on several levels above you, right? Because they've exposed this. Meanwhile, it's actually pretty amateur. Okay, so they're going into the interview just kind of not taking a lot of things at face value. They want it demonstrated. Okay, now the other thing is that, like I've said in videos and things, is that their job is there's recruitment and there's selection. Recruitment is going out and finding candidates. Selection is the process of gradually eliminating candidates till you're left with one, and that's how you select. That's the person you hire. Okay, so selection is like reducing that pool of candidates. Okay, now when it comes to selection, they're going to need a reason to eliminate you. They're going to look for reasons to eliminate people. The salary question is probably the biggest one. How much money do you need? Well, if you need too much money because you're used to being paid a lot and they can't pay you that money, it doesn't matter how brilliant you are. It's not going to work. They eliminate you, right? Now, let's say they get through a couple of those. Then they come to the weakness question, which is probably the king of the elimination questions. And that's saying, like, look, there's got to be something wrong with you, okay? There's got to be a reason why we might not want to hire you. What is the reason? And then you say, well, you haven't asked me about, the fact that I'm like a raging alcoholic, right? And then you mention that and they go, well, thank you very much. And then they eliminate you, right? That's what this question is about. They're looking for an obvious reason to eliminate you. As part of the selection process, where they're refining that pool of candidates from 100 people down to 20, down to 10, down to 3, down to 1. Okay, so somewhere along that process, they're going to use this question. And if you give up something that they regard as serious and real, they eliminate you. It's just that simple. And you can't get out of it, like we said at the beginning, by, saying I have no weaknesses, right? Or, my weakness is chocolate, wah, ha, ha, right? Or my weakness is that I just work too hard, right? They'll say, they're lying. Lying is a red flag, eliminated. Can't trust anything you're saying, eliminated. So that's the purpose of this question, and that's how they're going into it. Okay? They're looking to trip you up. So I find it a little disingenuous sometimes, when recruiters say you should give an honest weakness and you should say how you're working on it, because that's what recruiters want to hear. I would correct that to that's what some recruiters want to hear, the good ones. But a lot of them who are bad, that doesn't work on them. They hear something bad, they eliminate you. It's just that simple. So the challenge is you've got to convince them you're not lying, you're being honest, and you give them something that's not going to eliminate you. That's what we're up against. Okay? I've also heard it said about the thing about traits. Don't give a trait as a weakness. Well, I answered that earlier a little bit, but I'm going to say it again here because it's important. A trait can be a weakness. I mean, if you're so horribly shy that, any kind of situation where you have to get up in front of a group and say, read results or, like speak, maybe there's like a group of employees at work and the boss is talking to the group and you have to lift up your hand and ask a question, but you can't do that because you're so shy, right? And you're shy because of a trait, That's still a weakness. In that context, they're going to perceive that as a weakness. So I don't buy the whole don't give a trait thing as a weakness. It can be a weakness. Okay. Okay, so your goal is to not to give them any dirt on you so they can eliminate you. Francisco again. In an interview, you should put yourself in a position where the recruiter is in a higher level in trying to manipulate the situation, making him feel he was doing a perfect job and making this to success. Well, I'll put it this way. You don't want the interviewer to feel that they got played, right? You want them, they have criteria on what they want to hear, and you have to give them what they want to hear, basically. You can't give them something that they would consider a red flag. You can't give them something that they would consider to be a lie, most likely a lie. Okay? It's just this cat and mouse, dog and pony show that job interviews usually are. Okay? Joseph says, weakness having weak boundaries, which leads to a host of downstream issues. Yeah, that might make sense. For example, the work-life balance would be an obvious barrier. A lot of people have struggle with the work-life balance, right? Okay. I'm just looking at. I jotted down some notes. See how professional this is? This is how I take notes. Okay, we covered what you're improving on. And as I say, that's a great answer. If you're talking to a manager one-on-one and it's on the hidden job market, meaning that you didn't respond to a job ad to talk to this person, you are just talking to this person to talk to this person. There's no mention of a job at the other end, okay? That's how you get jobs on the hidden job market. You talk to people, and if you're an introvert, this is important because you can do this entirely online. You don't have to meet a single person face to face. You don't have to have a single phone call with somebody to set all this stuff up, okay? Introverts can be great at this. I'm an introvert, and this is all I've done exclusively for the last 10 years or something. When you're talking to a hiring manager in that context, you can give an honest answer, and that would be better. I would advise giving an honest answer in that context. Okay. So all these answers that you're submitting, like the latest one from Joseph about having boundaries, these are all valid things you could say in that context, right? But for a standard job interview, when you're dealing with a recruiter, I would say no to all of these. These are actual weaknesses. And don't get me wrong, it's great that you know this about yourself, and it's great that you're working on it. I'm going to turn down the brightness again. Again, there we go. Gives you an idea of the level of technology I'm using here. Right? Because a standard recruiter for, what was it? Entry-level jobs or large organization, or you're dealing just with a typical recruiter, they won't regard those answers as good. They'll regard it as a flaw that's their reason to eliminate you. Especially if it's an early round. They hear something bad, they're not going to want to go deeper. Oh, there's something bad already? Okay, I'm going to cut my losses with this candidate. Right? So finally, let's get on with what you should actually say, what I would actually recommend that you say after, what is it, an hour of waffling on about this. Let's talk about this. So, okay, if you've seen some of my videos, you will recognize this answer, which I've given before. Okay, you have to say something bad. You just have to. You can't say, if they say, what is your weakness? You can't just list good things. Oh, I'm amazing. I'm a hard worker. I love my job. I care too much. I work super hard. You can't just list good things. You have to say a bad thing. Okay. So, but the thing we're going to say, it's going to be a bad thing that's an unavoidable side effect of a good thing. Okay. And you have a whole universe of things to pick from. Okay. Usually one good thing, whatever it is, will result in a bad side effect. For example, you care about quality. You do your job really well. What could be a possible bad side effect of that? Well, maybe you don't work super fast, right? Because you're making sure you do a good job, right? So it's that type of response we're going to give. We're going to give something bad that's a side effect of something good. So, well, what's your weakness? Well, my weakness is I care about quality. I care about doing things well, okay? Unfortunately, that can sometimes lead to me being not the fastest worker, right? There's the bad thing, okay? Now, if we left it there, the person hearing this will have a bad thing sort of resonating in their head, like, oh, they're not a fast worker. They're not a fast worker. What's my notes? Okay, they're not a fast worker, right? That's the takeaway, okay? So we don't want to leave it there. We want to leave them with a good thing. Okay? And we also want to leave them with the impression that whatever bad thing we said, it's not a problem. Okay? So we got to say one other thing. And the one other thing is going to be how we fix that bad thing. Okay? So your answer might be something like, when they ask you, what is your weakness? You may say something like, well, I care about doing high quality work. Okay, that's very important to me. I don't like things being half-assed. I like them to be done properly. I hold them to a very high quality standard. But unfortunately, this sometimes has the effect that I take a little longer to do my tasks than other employees. Okay, but what I've learned is that once you do this a few times, you actually learn quite a few shortcuts that can really help streamline the process. So, that whole going slower thing, it really doesn't, like, I don't know. You like that answer? It really doesn't end up being an issue because I've learned how to compensate for it, right? So recruiter thinks, okay. What impression am I left with? Well, they do a good job. That's what I'm left with. Right? Like, if you were to simplify that, what's the takeaway? There's no obvious negative takeaway, right? So what you've actually done is you've mentioned two strengths and a weakness in the middle. And the weakness isn't even something that you do that's bad. It's a side effect, an understandable side effect of something good, right? So you did say something negative, but they can't really take away that you're like a bad employee in any way. Okay, so to condense this down to a formula, there's three things you say, A, B, and C. I do A, which is a good thing. But that can lead to B, which is a bad thing. Okay, this is an understandable bad thing. But then I do C, which fixes it. Right? And it's no longer a problem. So that's the answer I would recommend, okay? For most recruiters, that will generally work. Okay, because you are not saying I have no weaknesses, you're giving them something, but what you're giving them is perfectly understandable. You could say the obvious, you know? They ask you, what's your weakness? You say, oh, I'm a very fast worker. You know, I like to go, 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 go. You know? But unfortunately, that can lead to occasionally I might make a mistake because I'm going fast. But what I found is that, you know, if I do a couple of quick checks at the end, I can catch most of those, and it's usually never a problem. Right? I just flipped it around. Okay? So speed and quality, they're called contradictions. They go like this, right? What are some other contradictions? Like, let me know in the chat. What are some other contradictions that, you know, like, for example, pleasing people, right? Versus making quick decisions. Right? Like, if you make an executive decision, it's quick, right? We're going to do this. No more discussion. We're doing it. Go. Right? Quick. But perhaps people don't like that. They're upset. They're like, why are we doing this? It's so stupid. Right? So what's the opposite? Well, you take the trouble to communicate with everybody one-on-one. You ask them for their opinion. You put the time in to communicate with them two-way. Right? Make them feel like they're listened to, make them feel like you care, make them feel like you take their opinion seriously. You explain your decision, convince them it's the right thing by giving them the context, right? So your relationships with your coworkers go up or your subordinates go up. But it's a long, slow process to do that, right? So a lot of things will have like a contradiction, okay? So you could like pick any of these and say, I do this. And it can be an honest thing that you do. But sometimes it can lead to this. And it's an understandable negative. It's not your fault. That's just a side effect of that concept. But then you do this other thing that fixes it. Okay. So where were we here? We got the feed moving. Joseph, right? Weak boundaries. Yep, we did that one. Happy to see you, sir. I'm happy to see you too. Sumanin. If I'm saying that, I'm sure I'm not saying it right. But thank you for being here. You are here to try and improve your abilities. That's awesome. You keep this up for months, years, you are going to kick ass. Dana B says, what if you are a slow learner and need patience? When I know my job, I'm fast and the hardest, but everyone praises fast learners. Well, you could say something like, you know, I take the time to learn things well, okay? I don't like jumping into something where, you know, I haven't been trained properly and I don't really know what I'm doing. I like to do things well, okay? I like to know, have the confidence to produce high quality work, okay? The problem is this can take sometimes a little bit of time, okay? But over the years of having this attitude and dealing with it in this way, I've learned to streamline how I learn and do only the most efficient ways of filling the gaps in my knowledge. And so that's never really a practical problem anymore. You know, I'm sort of making this up on the spur of the moment. You might want to rehearse it a few times and then you don't trip over trip over your own words like I'm doing. But something along those lines. You know, now it's up to you if you give like a brutally honest flaw, okay, or deficiency. Okay, you can, if you're dealing with a forthright recruiter, or better yet, a hiring manager, or better yet, a hiring manager on the hidden job market, I would definitely do that. But if it sounds too incriminating to be honest with your with your actual flaw, you might want to water it down a little. Okay. Edward says, I'm happy to join this live stream. Quite informative. Thank you. I'm glad you're getting value from my endless rambling. You know, one of my weaknesses is that I need to put more pauses, more breaks. I have to slow myself down. That's the introvert. Because I tend to have a motor mouth, like for, half an hour straight. Kevin says, hello, Bill. Just joined the stream and want to ask what to do if you have a good answer to this question, but you are constantly being cornered and pinned down, whatever good thing you say. Red flag. Well, in the last, 10 minutes, I've been talking about sort of the answer I recommend, and that has the flaw, the red flag built in. You do this good thing, but it can lead to this bad thing, right? So you are bringing that up. It's like a preemptive strike. You are giving them a negative thing, but you're giving a certain negative thing that's understandable. And then you're directly addressing it in your next line when you say what you do to fix it. Okay? So that should hopefully take care of that concern. Now, if they press you for more information, you don't reveal any more flaws, okay? You basically explain kind of what you just said. Maybe they need more detail. Maybe they're not really coming with you on it, so you have to explain what you mean. But I wouldn't give them more flaws. You see, they're going to try. It's a very adversarial situation. They're going to try and get you to reveal your flaws, and you're going to try and paint yourself in the most positive light possible. It's a contradiction. So they're going to say all kinds of things that will perhaps, make you feel pressure to say negative things about yourself. You also have to resist that. We talked about that on a previous question when I gave an answer to the question, how do you handle stress? That question's a rabbit hole. You can't really cover that topic in detail without giving negative things about yourself. Because if you talk about how stressed you are, you're talking about like times in the past where you were stressed and things you've had to do to manage all the stress you were feeling. Like the more you talk about it, the more they're getting this picture of someone who gets stressed easily. So it's a trap. You're not at the job interview to talk about how bad you are at stuff. Okay? So you try every trick in the book not to engage. And that includes my favorite, which is they say, how do you handle stress? You say, I handle it well. Right? Silence. You're not taking the bait. And then you let them fill the silence. And they go, okay. And they move on to the next question, usually. Or they take a second attempt at it and say, well, I'm sure, you feel stress. Like, how does that work or something? You say, well, I like everyone feels a certain amount of stress, but I don't let it become a problem. I can hold that silence forever if I need to. I'm not going to engage on this question. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk about how awesome I am and how I've got everything that you're looking for. And that none of the requirements are going to be a problem. That's what I'm doing here. So I'm not going to be fooled by these attempts to get me to talk about something I did 10 years ago that has nothing to do with this job. It has nothing to do with anything you're looking for. And these questions are distractions. They're not talking about, do you have what we're looking for? They're saying, do you have a flaw, a problem? Now, let's say you're a very talkative person like me. And you've done a lot of thinking about your own flaws. And when you get to a job interview, they start off by saying, tell me, what are some of your flaws? And you go, I'm so glad you asked me that. Let's get into this. Okay, you might want to pour yourself a drink, right? Get comfortable. Failure. They'll thank you for your time. They'll say, that was all very interesting. We'll call you. Meaning, of course, that they won't call you. That's what that means. We'll get back to you. That means I will never get back to you. People that have been in business for a while, they know this. Unfortunately, people coming out of school, especially detail-oriented people, introverted people, who tend to take things at face value, they have a hard time realizing, and it's a painful process to learn, that these people mean the opposite of what they're saying. How many times has that happened? Recruiter says to you, you did great. I will be in contact with you next Tuesday to follow up. Never hear from them again, right? Right? How does that feel? That's a fun lesson to learn, isn't it? I think everybody learns that lesson at some point in their lives. And no one really tells you this. You just learn it through experience, right? Okay. We did Kevin, right? Kevin Robles. Good to see you, Kevin. Dana B has a smiley face. Does that mean I have to give a smiley face back? This is my smiley face. Yeah, that's why I don't do that face very often. Practice your smile. If you want to go into management, you want to be some kind of a leader, unfortunately, you have to practice your smile. That's the first stages of being a sociopath, where you stand in the bathroom winking and smiling at yourself in the mirror. That's the first stages of it's all coming undone. Salutations from India. Hello from Canada. It's great to see you here. It's probably late in India. We're on like the opposite sides of the earth. So I appreciate you being here. JT Does Stuffs. That's an awesome name. Your insights are very helpful. Thank you for your channel. My pleasure. I'm glad you're getting something from it. Introverts call you again. Very relatable. Yeah, I know. And that's the other thing I don't like about recruiters, is that they can never be honest. Because, look, let's be honest. They do have a rough job. If you're interviewing or you're dealing with 100 applicants for a job, you have to give 99 of them bad news in some way, shape, or form. That's how it goes. I mean, it's great telling one person you got the job and you can share in their happiness and relief and all that, but 99 people didn't. And, if you really focus on that, that can make it a very rough job for just that part alone. So I get it. Okay. That's a downside to being a recruiter. If you are a manager, there's equally a downside to it. But there is a good way of going about it and a bad way. Okay. This whole thing of like people think that they're being hired, but they're actually not. That's just a bad way of doing it. People are waiting for your call, thinking it'll come when you have no intention of calling them. That's not a good way of doing it. The best thing for me is, I imagine you would have in your job posting something that says, look, if we select you to move on, we will contact you by this date. If you don't hear from us, thank you very much. We encourage you to check out some of our other positions, something like that. To me, that's good, because then you don't need that contact to say, you know what? Sorry, you didn't get the job, right? You're no good. We went with somebody else. Other candidates were better than you. Nobody likes hearing that. Don't talk to candidates about other candidates. Don't talk to candidates about other candidates being better than them. That's totally the wrong way of doing it. When you go to the store and there's a representative of a company trying to get you to buy something, how do you think they feel if you say, no, I'm not buying your product. I'm getting their product because it's better than yours. Does that make them feel good? No. It makes them feel like, man, I hate this job. You know? Right? I mean, it's just professionalism. You want to make everybody feel as good as possible while being honest, while communicating properly. Right? And I've seen a lot of younger people that get, like, what's the word? Pessimistic, jaded, because they encounter this highly fake communication. Not only is it demoralizing because you're being rejected, but then they don't even do the courtesy of being honest with you. They treat you like an idiot or they treat you like a fool. You know? Anyway. Excuse me. Need more Red Bull with which to fuel my rant. That's good enough. LOL, Wally Lamb. Hello, everybody, says Bavini. Hello, Bavini. Leonardo says hi. Hi, Leonardo. So hopefully that makes sense. That's kind of, I mean, I hate to sort of go on these rants against recruiters, but basically, I'm going on rants against people that can't communicate professionally. And I'll tell you something. If you want to have a long and prosperous career, one simple thing you can do that has a big impact is learning how to communicate, okay? If you have to deliver bad news, learn how to do it properly. In large organizations, in my experience, most people don't know how to do this. And that explains partially why morale is generally so low in large organizations. And you have a lot of process-focused people. And you have a lack of initiative. One of the reasons for that is the lack of really good communication skills. Okay? And a big part of communication skills is delivering bad news in such a way that the other person, that the receiver, doesn't get upset. Okay? And I've seen masters at work. I remember earlier on in my career, like 20 years ago, something like that. I've seen great examples of this. I've been told that I didn't get a job, that I did like 4 interviews with or whatever and a bunch of tests. I've been told I didn't get that job in such a way that I didn't feel bad about it. Because the people communicating it and doing it were absolute masters of this. Absolute masters. You know, these people exist. So imagine what they're like to work with. You know? It's like you have to say no to people. That's just a common thing in life and in business. But if everyone you say no to, they think, God, I hate that person. I'm never dealing with them again. Right? Or I'm never doing them a favor again. Or I'm going to avoid interacting with them as much as I possibly can for the rest of my life. If they have that reaction, you are not a good communicator. And most people are not good communicators when they start out. It's something you learn. And just because you might be a manager or something, you know, that doesn't mean you're a good communicator. There are a hell of a lot of managers that just are horrible at this. Absolutely horrible. And a lot of industries where this is really not valued. You know, so if you want to make yourself more employable and you want to open up opportunities for yourself, being a great communicator is definitely one of those. And it's really not hard. This is not hard to learn. You could learn this stuff in like a month or 2, and then you know it for the rest of your life. And then every other person that comes in contact with you throughout your life or your professional career, they think, you know, I like that person. I'd like to work with them. You know, if I had to work with them, that would be pretty cool, right? Imagine having that effect on everyone that you encounter in a variety of situations. You know, you're put together for, you know, it's a happy occasion, or you're put together in a not so great occasion, right? Or, you know, a highly nervous kind of occasion, or a relaxed occasion. If everyone you interact with thought that way about you, things would really help. So the key to that is interpersonal skills, and most of that is communication skills. So if you're the type of person that wants to improve themselves, that's an area I highly recommend you bone up on. Usually, it's not something that we're taught in school. You know, you might go to school to learn a profession, like an actual profession, like medicine, law, architecture, engineering, or you learn, an ability, right? You're going to be a bookkeeper, you're going to be a safety person, or, whatever, right? Very seldom do they sort of have a component in there of like how to communicate professionally. And then even if there is something on that, when they teach you that in school, it's usually done by people who have no clue how to communicate professionally. So it's of limited value. Oh, somebody mentioned sociopath, so now I'm interested. JT Does Stuff says, I'm alone in my room, nodding in agreement on your talk on my comment. Does that make me beginning to be a psycho-sociopath? No, first of all, that I'm very flattered, and you're giving me a compliment, which is the beginnings of what I was just talking about. Right? When you interact with somebody and the reaction from the other person, from the receiver is, wow, that person's really cool. I'd like to interact with them more. That's a great thing. And you've just demonstrated that with this. I feel flattered. That's a very nice thing to say. You didn't have to say that. You could have just kept quiet about it, but you intentionally took the trouble to write all that out so that I would see it to make me feel better. That's great. And it's disguised as a question. I mean, maybe you want an answer to it. I know you're making a joke, but it's not like obvious flattery, right? It's not like saying, wow, Bill, what an amazing shirt you're wearing today. Oh my God, you're on fire. You're not doing that. That's an obvious compliment, right? You've weaved it in to a question, you're asking a legitimate question, or you're making a joke. So yeah, that's the beginnings of that. And it doesn't make you a psycho-sociopath. I'm not sure what that is. I don't know if that means you're a psychopath or a sociopath, or you've just taken it to the next level. I'm not sure. But no. It's probably because you can relate to this stuff. A lot of people can relate to it, but nobody really talks about it for some reason. I'm on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is full of people doing posts about business. And it's the most like self-important, out-of-touch baloney, for want of a better word. But nobody talks about any legitimate stuff, like how to actually communicate in a way that makes people like you. And attempting as much as possible to be genuine. Real Dev Bro says, if you don't mind answering about your first job and how you got around, thank you. My first, like you're asking me about my first job? Now, for a lot of people, you got to clarify, because they probably have a first job in their lives, and then they have their first career job, right? But I think when I was like 17 or something, I got a series of casual jobs in the summer. And I painted a house. I photocopied blueprints at an engineering firm. And I worked in the circus. I joined the circus for 2 weeks. There was a circus that came through town. This is back when we had circuses. You have animals and acrobats and clowns and all this. And I'm a 17-year-old, not knowing anything about anything. And they just needed manual labor. They needed like 1,000 people to put up these giant circus tents. So I was hired for that. And afterwards, they said, we need a few people to stay on and help with putting on the shows. So you're like a stagehand, you're clearing, stuff out of the ring between acts and moving things around and stuff like that. And so for 2 weeks, I did that while the circus was in town. And because I had, you would never know this now in a hard to believe kind of way, I had experience like rock climbing and things. and I didn't have a fear of heights, I was the person that had to go up to, towards the top of the tent. I had to climb these girders, whatever you call them, and tie the trapeze back. After the tumblers and acrobats and things had done their act, I had to go get it and tie it back so it wouldn't be like dangling around during the other acts. So that was my first specialty, I guess you could say. And then after 2 weeks, they said, well, we need some people to come on the road with us. And unfortunately, I said no. I would have loved to run away with the circus. My life would be different. I'd probably be giving you some interesting advice now. But yeah, that was my first job, technically. It had nothing to do with a career. It wasn't a career job, obviously. But yeah, there you go. Fun. That was a fun trip down memory lane. And hopefully that was very educational for everyone. Dana B says they don't teach integrity, honesty, and sincerity. Yes. In fact, I don't know about you guys, but I always get the impression from like looking at, business and, from the outside, like watching movies and watching the news and things, you get the opposite impression. You get the, nice guys finish last kind of, working on Wall Street and being a sociopath and having it pay off, at least in the short term. You get this opposite impression that you've got to be a jackass and you've got to be a liar. Some industries, I think, operate more like that. Like for me, real estate and residential construction kind of, to me, they seem to operate like that. I've never had so many people lie to my face as when I had some interaction with those industries. And if you're not used to that, you just assume people don't do that. You assume people that are professionals, that are successful, that are business decision makers, you assume they wouldn't behave like that. But they do, and apparently everyone does in certain industries. A lot of industries where there's a lot of blue collar type stuff. Great communication skills are not usually prevalent. And it can be a very tough culture. People yell at each other. People insult each other constantly. And consequently, everybody feels like crap. But at the same time, no one wants to admit that you should be nicer. And all I can say is, if you are aware of this, as much as possible, steer clear of those industries. Florin says, hello again from Bucharest, Romania. Yes, it's the capital. I love your live streams, and I've learned a lot from you that will help me in my future interviews. Great. I'm glad it's helping somebody. Thank you for saying so, Florin. I appreciate that. Real Dev Bro, again, both would be nice. Now you mentioned it, thank you. Real Dev Bro, if you don't mind answering, was the first job and how you... Yeah. So the big lesson today is don't run away with the circus. Or maybe you should. Maybe you should, and then tell me how it went, because I've always wondered how that would have gone. But yeah. So there you go. So anyway, so we covered the weakness question. So hopefully everybody understands what to do with the weakness question. Just remember, it's that formula. They ask you, what is your weakness? You say a good thing that you do. Okay. It's a good thing. Okay. And then you give an understandable side effect or consequence of that good thing. Okay. I care about high quality, but occasionally that means I'm not the fastest worker ever. Something like that, right? And then, so you've got two things, a good thing, a bad thing, and then you give a third good thing that fixes the problem. I'm not the fastest worker, but I've learned that it is possible to streamline that process, do some pretty obvious checks, and then you can kind of get the best of both worlds. It's good, and speed is never a problem. Right? So replace those three things with practically anything. Something good that has a side effect, but then what you do to manage the side effect. And if you can make it approaching honest, as long as it's not too incriminating, for example, don't say, I'm an alcoholic, but, or like, I take my job very seriously and I, work very hard, but then I have to unwind and that's when I hit the bottle, right? But it's okay because I've been to rehab several times. It's not a problem. Like, that would be a little too incriminating, okay? So say something relatively harmless that's legitimate. I do this good thing, but it has this bad side effect. But then I do this to manage the side effect, okay? And, plug in, if you have the choice, plug in something honest, because then if they do ask you for more information or something, you can just give it because you're being genuine. Okay? So that's how I'd recommend that people answer that. If, however, you have the luxury of speaking to a hiring manager or a decision maker in the hidden job market, scrap all of that and just be honest, because they will appreciate that and good things will happen. They won't have their guard up like a recruiter will, and neither should you. Okay? If you're in that situation. Incidentally, if you want to learn from beginning to end how to get into that type of situation, check out my course, my Get Hired course. There's a link in the description. Many people have been taking that recently, so that's great to see. But yeah, it's like all my sort of step-by-step advice for the entire like how to get a job question from beginning to end with scripts, with steps. And it's not just one way of getting a job. It's not just passing job interviews. That is a component of the course, but it's also like how to do the hidden job thing. And then other more advanced techniques that you can do. Okay, that I haven't really mentioned too much on this channel. I did do some long videos a while ago, like a year or two ago about them, but I haven't really mentioned them since. So if you want the whole shebang-a-bang from beginning to end, check out that course. And like you probably are aware, I also have another course called the $100 MBA. A lot of people last month, a lot of people got that course. And that's if you want to learn everything that you learn in an MBA from the same textbooks and the same sources as you do in university, from places like Harvard, okay? It's not accredited. It's not accredited because there's no evaluations. So you can skim the material and just get an overview, or you can go really, really deep. You can take like a year to read each book and really get into it and do all the problems and exercises, if that's what you want. But you do it entirely on your own pace, on your own terms. And this particularly useful if it's your abilities that matter and not the piece of paper. Okay, that's what it's for. It's not meant to be a replacement of an accredited MBA. It gives you the same result, a lot of pretty much, but it's like $100, instead of $10,000 and taking 2 years of your life full time. Okay, so if that's of any interest to you, check that out. Link in description. Yeah, and also I'm on Patreon. If anybody's into Patreon, I have a few Patreon supporters, and that's great to see. And I appreciate all of them. But you can either do that, or you could join my YouTube channel and do the kind of the same thing, but here. So there you go. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to open it up for questions for a little bit. So if anyone has any questions, send in your questions, and I'm opening it up. So any question you might have. I have another sort of half an hour if people wanted to ask anything. I think that's how you know you've drunk too much Red Bull, when your hand shakes as you lift the cup to your mouth. It's kind of doing that a little bit, I remember several years ago, I had to work some very long hours, and I sort of got into Red Bull then, because they enabled you to do that. Okay, Leonardo says, I have a job interview in the next couple of days. This is my first one. I've seen your videos, but I go blank when asked a question. Listen, Leonardo, what might help you if you haven't done it already is to do mock interviews, do like a practice interview with, if you have a friend or a family member that can help you. Practice makes perfect. Everybody starts out being intimidated and, nervous, and it's a skill like any other. The more you work at it, the better you get. I don't care who you are going to improve. And if you work on it, you can even surprise yourself at how good you get at this stuff. Okay. It's really not that hard. They only ask like about 8 standard questions, something like that. And once you've learned to identify like, oh, what they're asking is actually this question, so if you've memorized your like 8 answers to it and you've rehearsed them a bit, they kind of roll off your tongue, that helps enormously. It's very hard for most people to think off the cuff in an interview. You're in an unfamiliar place. You got one or possibly more people that you don't know staring at you. You're nervous. The stakes are high. They could hire you or they could not, right? Very few people can really think up original answers that are well thought out under those conditions. So we rely on having rehearsed things, right? Having rehearsed different things for different eventualities. And the more of that you do, the better you get. And the more you do over time, the more interviews you go to, you will get better and better. Okay. So just the more practice you can do, the better. And then beyond that, don't sweat it. The number one factor that determines whether you get hired is basically luck. Okay. Preparation has a role, but it's the number one factor is luck. Okay. So just do your best. And, if you don't get it, that's fine. That's kind of expected. The more interviews you do, the higher your chance of getting hired. And then eventually, if you're doing a lot of interviews, eventually you will get hired. Okay. So, that's what you're up against. So hopefully that makes sense. Dana B, you have to go. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate that. You take care. Edward says, quick question, sir. What if you walk into a room with more than 7 people waiting to interview you, and for almost half a minute, they are just looking at you, waiting for your first words? How do I start? Okay, well, without making jokes, about it, you'd say, hey, everybody, it's good to meet you all. And then, you go up to them and say hi, and then you say your name. Like I would say, hi, I'm Bill Todd. It's very nice to meet you. And then now they have to like shake your hand. They have to say who they are. And they say, oh, my name is John Smith. You say, oh, well, it's very nice to meet you, John Smith. And then you could even, if you feel adventurous, you could even go further and say like, oh, I really like your tie, or, you're very well prepared today, I can tell, or something like that. And that kind of cuts the tension in the room. It starts people to talk. It hopefully doesn't feel anywhere near as awkward. Okay. And then you go to the next person. If there's 7 people, you do that to 7 people, right? Okay. And then pretty soon they're all sort of like wanting to shake your hand and they're all talking to you. So that would be like, just, you gave me that situation. That's how I would approach it. Now, if they're like really unfriendly or something, you'd have to sort of play that by ear depending on how it goes. But I wouldn't expect that. Okay. And if they are really unfriendly and they're not responding to you, or you say, hi, how are you doing? It's great to meet you. And they say, hi. Like that's just a red flag. I don't think anything's going to go well if they're starting with that kind of demeanor. So don't worry about it. Okay. But that's maybe a great place to start. Elsa RM said, should you speak about the fact that you are a weed smoker as a weakness, or is it personal? I would definitely not say that. Okay, that's a red flag. That's like saying I'm an alcoholic. At least it'll be perceived that way. Okay. Now, for example, where I'm live streaming from in Canada, weed is legal now. Like you can smoke it, whatever, But even if you were in Canada and it's like not, frowned upon or illegal or anything, I still wouldn't say it. Okay. That's not what they're wanting to hear. Okay. Go in there and say, they say, what's your weakness? Say, well, I hit the herbal jazz cigarettes pretty hard, but it's okay because I have a system, I wouldn't sort of go into that. But that's a good question. A lot of people wonder that. A lot of people say stuff like that. Okay. Keep it professional. Just think, what would be like a professional business person kind of thing to say? That might be a sort of general guide. I was going to say, would Elon Musk say it? But maybe that's not the best litmus test. Maybe someone like Bill Gates. Would Bill Gates talk about smoking weed? Probably not. So there you go. I'm glad we went there. Francisco says, what can you answer when asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I did an entire 2-hour live stream about that. And I have some videos on it. Short answer is somebody says, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I would say, well, I see myself advancing based on my performance. And let them move on. Because once again, that's another rabbit hole. It's the future question, right? What they want to hear is that you want to work there. Okay? You want to hire me for this job? They say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? You say, in this job. Because I love this type of work. I love this kind of company. But the problem is that if you actually said that, they probably are not going to believe you. It's that whole too good to be true, spin that they put on things because their guard is up. Right? If you were dealing with a hiring manager on the hidden job market, you might want to give a more obvious answer. And if you said that, they might believe you. But I don't think a hiring manager in the hidden job market would ask you that question. It's not a natural question. Okay. That's a tricky situation, really, Dana. Which one was Dana? Oh, yeah. Yes, it is. Santa Trinita, appreciate the invaluable advice you're providing. Thank you very much. I appreciate you saying so. JT does stuff. After I came across your channel and went through most videos, I faced an interview and it went pretty well till it's between me and another lady. I wasn't selected, but I felt quite satisfied. Yeah, like this is what I'm saying. It's a matter of luck. If 100 people apply, they can only hire one. There might be 20 that would be perfectly qualified, that could do a good job. And there might be 20 that did a great interview. Okay? But the problem is they have to pick one person. And a lot of times it comes down to some really stupid criteria, if it even is a systematic decision. A lot of times it comes down to the person that they like the most on a personal level. And let me be clear about this. They put you through these completely artificial interactions, okay, that feel very awkward, very unnatural, and then they pick the person they like the most. I mean, that should tell you how silly that is, okay? That's why somebody mentioned sociopaths earlier, that's why sociopaths tend to do very well at these questions, because they don't get nervous, and they don't really care. And then they say the textbook right thing, and they act super pleasant. It goes to show you how accurate this process really is. It's notoriously inaccurate, and we have data to show this. Okay, like people with PhDs in business, okay, that work in universities and other private institutions around the world have been studying these questions for decades with data in a very scientific way. And they've concluded that, it's extremely inaccurate. Your ability to spot a good employee versus not a good employee, it's completely inaccurate. Even higher level jobs where you're hiring executives, where it's much more important that you get the right person. And a lot more effort goes into it. They use psychometrics and they do all kinds of other things. And even that is shown to be very inaccurate. Okay? your ability to assess somebody and whether they would be good in a job or not. So don't feel too bad if you get rejected going through this process, okay? It's like someone literally rolling a dice, okay? That's literally what it's about. Don't take the rejection to heart. It has no bearing on you, your value, how good you are as a person, how good you are, how good your resume is or your professional experience. Don't think that it's a reflection of any of those things. It is not. I can tell you that for a fact. Okay, JT does stuff. In addition to the above, I didn't mind not being selected as I was already selected somewhere else earlier and pays much better too, and was happy to not be selected, in fact. Yeah, I mean, look, even if you're going down the process with one company, never stop looking. Always be talking to other companies. Okay? If you're doing interviews with one company, if you can get interviews with another company for a different job, go for it. Okay? That gives you options. That gives you power. You can then decide between two job offers or what other option, Maybe it might come up that you've got like a firm job offer from this company and it's okay, but maybe this other company, they're offering you some like contract work or temporary work or part-time work. That's another option, right? Maybe this one will pay you more money, but this one might be more interesting. It'll be a funner job and you can learn more. Or maybe it's better for your career if you go there. Having options gives you power. So do everything you can to get as many options as possible. Pursue as many opportunities as you can. And don't just look for jobs one way. You have like one strategy or tactic to be able to find a job. Do multiple approaches, okay? So you can respond to posted jobs, but also look in the hidden job market and then do a bunch of other things. So, yes. In Canada, I'm in CT, TY. Bye now. CT. Okay, so here is where I advertise my ignorance. CT, is that a province? No. TY is thank you. Is that Connecticut? CT? Anyway, that's good. Leonardo says, how short of long should I extend my answer? I mean, how short or long? Like the length of your answers. Well, it depends for the different questions. If they're questions that you want to get off those questions as soon as possible. If it were me, I would spend 15 seconds or less on those answers. Okay, so like, what is your weakness? How do you handle stress? Things like this. Okay, where do you see yourself in 5 years? You want to get off those questions. That's not why you're at the job interview. If they ask you, why should we hire you? Or what are your strengths? Then you want to talk as long as you want to have like a conversation with them that goes on as long as possible. If you could spend the entire interview just answering those two questions, you'd probably be doing very well because you're going to be giving them reasons why you're awesome, why you're the one, why you're fully qualified. And that's what you're there to talk about. Okay? So it isn't like a standard thing. If they ask you a behavioral question, okay, usually they start with, tell me about a time. That's something where you answer with a story from your past. Okay, so you're telling a story. For those types of questions, you want to spend maybe 45 seconds telling the story, maybe a minute, possibly. And that's where you answer in the star format, to sort of keep you on task. So you streamline the story. Okay, but don't be talking for 5 minutes telling a story. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. Edward says, way to go, sir. Thank you so much. I have to go now. We'll definitely stop in the next live stream. When is the next live? Okay, so So here's what I was thinking. I was going to do 2 live streams a week, Sunday and Wednesday. And as you guys know, I started a little bit earlier today. I was starting them at 11 a.m. my local time, which is Central Time in North America. I was starting them at 11 a.m. Today I started it at 9 a.m. And so far I'm liking that better, but depending on when you do a live stream, you're getting different audiences from around the world. So I think that's cool. So I originally did some at like 4 a.m. in the morning, and I may do that again if people want that. But thank you for joining me. That's great to have you here, and I wish you the best. Same to Dogan. Varder, thank you so much for the invaluable information. Thank you. Love Supreme. Oh, there's a name. Some of the best content on the internet, hands down. Thank you so much. That's very flattering. Yes, Connecticut. Yes, it took me a while. Eventually I get there. Connecticut. Is that like the Hamptons? I'm in the Hamptons. You're not like listening on a boat, are you, in Connecticut? You could be. But I've been to Connecticut. It's a very pleasant country there. Good evening, sir. I always had a pleasure listening to you. Thank you. Enzo Karate. But that's not like karate. That's like, karate, if you see what I'm saying. AK says, I have applied for jobs and gotten 0 interviews. Tailor my CL and resume per the job posting. Listen, AK, there's many reasons for that. Okay, if you are changing careers, applying for posted jobs will pretty much guarantee to get you nowhere. Okay, applying for posted jobs is one of the worst ways to get a job. I know that sounds surprising and unbelievable, especially if you're just starting out, but it's true. It's the default thing. And thanks to the internet, it is so easy to apply for jobs that you can easily get like hundreds and hundreds of candidates for every job. So not even going any further, if 600 people have applied for a job, statistically, your odds of getting selected are like less than 1%, right? It's like 0.2% or whatever, your odds. Statistically, that's if everybody has an equal chance, right? If everyone's equally qualified. So if you were to look for jobs on the hidden job market, a lot of times your competition is possibly one other person, okay? So there are better ways to get a job, not to mention the fact that you're not relying on your resume to make the argument why they should hire you. You're relying on your professionalism. The behavior you've just demonstrated is the biggest argument why they should hire you. So it's a little bit of a different thing. So if I were you and you're not already doing this, I would check out other ways of getting jobs. Okay. Yes, I can plug my course and I can say you could get my course, which covers the entire thing from beginning to end. But if you don't want to do that, do some research into other methods of finding jobs. And don't always just listen to recruiters, okay? Nothing against recruiters. There are some great ones, but the most common way of getting a job is through networking. Networking is when you're not going through a recruiter. Over 75% of people who get jobs through networking, not by responding to posted job ads with which you would go through a recruiter. Okay? This is another thing that they commonly don't tell young people. Okay? So if you're not having a lot of success just applying for posted jobs, okay, there are other more fruitful methods to get jobs, things that sell you on possibly more relevant and honest criteria. Okay, so check that out. Okay. Leonardo says, at the end of the interview, should I ask directly if I got the job? Is it okay? You know what? There's some people that recommend you do. if it were me, I would recommend not asking that super directly, like saying, so did I get the job? I mean, I'm sure other people will give you the opposite advice. Obviously, it depends on who you're talking to, how the other person would take that question. Okay. What I would say is some kind of another form of that's a little more benign, is saying, have you seen anything in other candidates, that you haven't seen in me that I could possibly speak to? Okay. So it's sort of an indirect way of saying, like, am I the best candidate? Okay. And then it also gives you the option of being able to, like, if they say, well, I have talked to other candidates that had more relevant experience than you in this area, right? If they may say something like that, you go, well, I didn't mention, like, if you look on my resume, you see that job right there? That, what you just described, that's what I did for 5 years. So I do have that. I'm glad you mentioned that because it hasn't come up in our meeting so far, but I do actually have that, and if you had any other questions for me on that, I mean, I can answer them. So, it gives you a sort of, that's like a safety net at the end. If there was something that they had not quite recorded that you have, that they were looking for, it gives you one last chance to be able to say, I got that. Okay. Some people like that. They say, I appreciate your directness. I mean, if it's like a sales type job and they're looking for someone that can close a sales deal, and you say, like, so did I get it? Did you give me the job? That, like, that pressure might convince them that, like, you can close a deal, But it depends who you're talking to. If you're talking to some introverted engineer type, they may not appreciate being put on the spot like that. And because they generally tend to be more honest, they probably say, I don't know about that, something. And it's like, oh, okay. So, yeah. Hopefully that makes sense. At the end of the interview, okay, Enzo Karate, it's like carrot. Awesome. I like carrots. Dana B, no boat, but I'm reading in the heart of the sea. I visited Lake Ontario as a kid. You're too good to listen to. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I've been to Lake Ontario, but the humidity is just an issue. I worked for a company that their headquarters was in Erie. I can't even remember. This is so long ago. Like, whatever the state is that Erie is in, but it's on the shore of Lake Erie, which is next to Lake Ontario. And just the humidity wiped me out being there for weeks and weeks or months or whatever it was. Automation Addict says, are there any questions tailored to see what the true culture of the company is like without getting a blanket answer? Yeah, if you ask them what's the culture of the company, they're going to either not really know what that means, or B, they're going to give you some baloney answer, some BS answer. We're very innovative and, we care about quality and, we play hard and we work hard and all that corporate crap that doesn't mean anything. Listen, the biggest answer to that is going to be how they deal with you. Okay. So if you encounter a bunch of gruff, nasty people, that tells you all you need to know. Okay. If you encounter a bunch of people that, really don't know what they're talking about, but they act like they do, that tells you all you need to know. If you go to a place, and I've done a video on this, you go to a place where you walk into the company and all the employees are being watched. It's an open concept. Like if you're a knowledge worker and you sit at a desk, if you're in an open concept type office, the bosses are all like, they've got an eye line to all their employees. You can make a very convincing argument that that's benign. It's so that I can, have better rapport with employees and workers work closer together. That sounds very nice. Okay. And it can be accurate, but most often it's because of the typical large organization culture, which is, it's called Theory X, where, we don't trust our employees. We assume that if we don't watch them, they will be goofing off, and we assume they hate their job. And the only way we can get them to work is if we force them to work through pressure, through watching them constantly and then policing them. Because if we turn our back, they won't do their job. That's the assumption that everything is based off. There's a lot of negative type things like that in large organizations. And it explains how large organizations behave. A lot of times people are miserable. They don't like their coworkers, and virtues are not really valued or rewarded, certain virtues. So if you see stuff like that, it's pretty obvious. Okay. Probably the most obvious thing is like how they treat you in a job interview. A job interview, believe it or not, technically is an advertisement for their organization. If you go there and you see a bunch of nasty people that do a terrible job and they're just unpleasant human beings, that's going to drive away talent more than anything. Now, if you see them doing this, the conclusion I come to is that, well, that's irrelevant. They don't need talent. They just need warm bodies, people to do jobs. They don't really care about excellence. They don't really care about quality. So that's kind of a common thing. And then on top of it, if they give you I hate to say this because this is very pessimistic, but if they give you the standard corporate BS, if you're like, if you're 21 years old, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world because it's kind of expected of them. But if you're 40 years old and they're giving you corporate BS, it's insulting. Everybody knows that it's all just a sales pitch and it's just a deflection. So most large organizations are actually quite bad to work for. I mean, there are exceptions, but, morale generally goes down. If you work in smaller organizations, I mean, there are a lot of bad smaller organizations, but the chances of it being like a happier place where you're trusted more goes up. That's what I'd say about that. I mean, once again, that's like a huge question. I could do an entire 2-hour live stream on that. I'd love to actually, but hopefully that makes sense. Okay, do you know the job interview scene in Better Call Saul? You could do a reaction video about it. I have watched Better Call Saul, but it seems like you've got to wait like so long between each season that I totally forget what the show was about and what happened in it. I also think that's a symptom of maybe not the greatest, most memorable plot lines in the world. It's like this sort of unending soap opera just rolls on and on and on. But I love the character of Saul. I mean, I think that's how it's meant to be written. He's like the sort of archetype of, smooth talking, manipulative person, but yet you're with him all the way. It's a great character. Francisco says, at the end of an interview, they always ask for questions. How can you get by this into the recruiter's mind so that they select you? I've done a video on that. If they say, do you have any questions for us? A good thing is to say like questions like, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for the person in this role? Things like that. I know some people recommend that you ask the recruiter or the hiring manager a question about their experience. They say like, what do you like best about working for this company? The problem with those questions is that 99.999999992% of the time, people are going to give you a complete BS answer. They're not going to be honest. They may hate working for the company and they're not going to say that, right? They'll say, oh, well, the opportunities here are fantastic and, just working with a great team, that kind of baloney. So that doesn't really reveal anything to you. It just reinforces how artificial the entire exchange is. A lot of people make recommendations that you ask these brilliant, cutting, revealing questions. In my experience, they don't work because, it's like playing poker. It's like saying to the other person, so, what are your cards, if I can just ask? And they'll say, well, I have the the ace of spades and the the 10 of clubs. Like he'll just make something up. There you go. There's your answer, right? They're not going to reveal, right? Now, obviously, that's a very cynical attitude I have, but that's based on experience. And I have taught recruiters in university, so for some things, I know what the standard HR theory is, like the flavor of the month reasoning why you should ask a certain question and what it reveals. It's all pseudoscience, it doesn't really work, but it's what they teach recruiters. It's a good starting off point. When you know nothing, they teach you that, and then hopefully, as you get decades of experience, you may learn what actually works. And Dogan says, I'm very happy to meet you. Where can we listen to this broadcast again? I'd like to take some notes. Well, thank you for asking that, Dogan. Okay, so here's the deal. I have 2 YouTube channels. I got this one, The Company's Expert, and I have my other one, The Company's Expert 2. And what I'm doing with the live streams is I'm leaving them up for half a day or a day, and then I'm moving them over to my second channel. Okay, so if you're not a subscriber of my second channel, The Company's Expert 2, that's something I'm going to recommend that you do, especially if you're interested in hearing these live streams again, because that's where they're going to be. Okay, and then what I've been doing the last couple of weeks is just doing clips, of some of the stuff that I say that's more bearable to listen to, and putting those on my main channel. So if you want to get the unabridged full 2-hour stream, it's going to be on The Company's Expert 2, and they're going to be coming out like Monday evening, Tuesday evening, Wednesday evening. I'm just putting the streams up. Okay, so that's where they're going to be. So thank you for asking that. Listen, I have to wrap this up in a couple of minutes because it's been over 2 hours. So any last questions? You've got about 30 seconds to put those in. I'll answer those, and then we'll wrap up. But I can see there's still 30 people here. So thank you. So thank you for being here, and for the people that have been listening since the beginning. That's really awesome. I hope it's useful. And if you have any ideas for what you'd like me to talk about, I'm doing a live stream on each of the standard job interview questions. Okay. Beyond that, if you do have an interest in just talking about business or entrepreneurial type things, for example, some of these questions that we got about like company culture and things like this, I'd love to talk about that stuff more. That's really what, my background is, and like how to make businesses work. And where I've applied this is in people trying to start up companies and things and helping them with that. Leading them to success. Because to me, that's the culmination of the hiring process. If you could not need somebody to give you permission to make money and hire you, you can just make money on your own. That's the pinnacle of the whole employment game. You get to keep all the money you generate. You don't have to give 80% of it to some organization that treats you like crap and makes your life miserable. But there's a lot more people that want to know how to get a job than there are people that want to know how to start a company. So that's kind of the problem. But if you have any questions like that, let me know, and I'll see if I can put them into like a live stream that just covers that. I'm very happy to meet you. Have we talked about the weakness question yet? Yeah, the first kind of 3/4 of this 2-hour stream, I think I spent mostly on that. Thank you so just replay, and I went into it quite a bit. Francisco says, you have been so helpful and clear in this live. Thank you. Once again, I can't say this enough. I appreciate you guys being here, and it's very flattering. And you guys have been asking some really on-the-point questions. There hasn't been any stupid questions. They've all been very legitimate, and that's great. JT does stuff. Thank you so much. More needs to hear about your channel. You really do have an impact. I'm one of them. keep making these videos. Have a nice day. Thank you, JT Does Stuff. Thank you to everybody who tuned in today. You guys are awesome. Okay. You're improving yourself. I imagine that's your motivation for being here. That's awesome. You keep doing this. After a certain amount of time passes, you are going to be on your A game. You're going to have this stuff down. It will no longer be a source of stress in your life. It will no longer be an impediment to your prospering and your fortune. So keep doing that. Thank you for listening to my stuff. Don't just listen to me. Listen to many other sources. Okay. And once again, if either of my courses would help you, my Get Hired course or my $100 MBA course, check out the links below. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome. And the next stream I'm going to do is on Wednesday. I will see you there, hopefully. Take care.